John Pauler, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So let's go back in a time capsule. The year's 2017. You're thinking about throwing a crypto conference. Tell me about that.
Well, it was, yeah, I didn't really have any goals of building a crypto conference. It was more like we didn't have any developers that could write a smart contract in Denver. Not very many. And we had hundreds of people, developers, showing up to our meetups that we were doing that summer when the kind of crypto bull hit in April, May. And we're like, well, how do we train these guys how to do this? And so we're like, well, let's do a hackathon. Let's bring in people from, all over the world to help with this. And, we had tried to do a hackathon, or at least it wasn't, I didn't have anything to do with it, but the organizers of the meetup had tried to do a hackathon earlier, in that spring, but it was 30, 40 people that showed up. And I was like, no. I'm talking about bigger production quality. Let's make this big. Let's get some of the Ethereum founders and they're like, how are you going to do that? They're not going to come to Denver. Nobody cares about Denver. It's like, why not? I was like, they got to go somewhere. Somebody's going to do something like this. I mean, there's just too much interest and we don't have any way to do that. So, yeah, it turned into, the goal was originally 400 people. It was 1,500 the first year, had 40 countries represented, and now it's grown to 25,000 people from 115 countries.
And so many naysayers initially, it sounds like, who thought that idea, not the right solution to a questionable problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've run into this my entire career. I'm kind of one of those dreamer type guys. It's like, sure, why not? We could do that, I don't consider of course there's risks and things, but I just don't care. It's like, all right, sure, it's gonna be hard, but where there's a will, there's a way. So just YOLO, let's go do it. So yeah, there was a lot of people along the way that were very skeptical, and I think my personality type is being a dreamer. A lot of people who are more sort of risk conscious see me as a shit talker, right? I talk a lot of shit, and they think it's just maybe ego or something like that. And it's not. I just don't care, And it's like, why not? YOLO. Now, is everything I've done in my history turned out exactly the way that I want it? No, but I've learned a lot, and the things that have turned out great turned out really great, and a lot of people thought it was impossible to do it. So, and I don't even care. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you were wrong. So I knew that in the beginning that you were wrong. I guess I proved it, but it's not about that. I don't care. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, well, I remember we met in 2018 and at the conference, and I was volunteering, and you were running around, and I remember just being impressed at how many problems you kind of had to solve on the fly, and I would say you're more than a dreamer in the sense of you execute well also, and I think that this whole podcast is about being a contrarian. And I believe that's one of the hardest parts about being a contrarian, right? Is that you have all these naysayers whispering in your ear, and most people think, oh, nobody's done this, so I'm not going to do it, or I shouldn't do it. Where contrarians get,
or there's got to be a reason why nobody's done this, right?
Right.
And it's like, so they kind of talk themselves out of it before they even get going. And there's a billion reasons not to do something. Billion, well, it could be risky, or it could look bad, or all this. Whatever, dude. If it's a good idea and there's value in it for people, the world, it might sound again a little dreamery, a little Pollyanna-ish, but I don't give a shit. I see a future where you can do good deeds and build big things and still get really rich, right? I don't think it has to be exclusive of each other. I think we're Web3 in a lot of ways is venturing into the future of work and evolving capitalism to be something new, you know? So, yeah, talk about being contrarian. I mean, like, you know, I always say that, you know, politically I'm not left or right, I'm up, right? So, I mean, if that's not a contrarian view, I don't know what is, but um, yeah, I just don't care. I do think that, you know, to your point about being a dreamer, you know, people who just dream and don't do, I think can be really dangerous to, you know, and I don't want to say that they're mean spirited or nefarious people usually. They're not, but like they don't take the time to understand like how to make something a reality. And to me, if you're just dreaming and pontificating and talking and not doing, then you know, I'm not sure that that's actually terribly helpful to people because I think the best thing you can do for anybody is set a good example, and an example is doing. So what I try to do is, you know, my work ethic, my intentionality around things, my dedication to things, my perseverance, which is intentional. I mean, things are hard. You get tired and annoyed and pissed off sometimes, but like you got to persevere. You got to stick in there. Um, all of these things are open for the taking for anybody else to. You want to know how I do it? Just come watch me, you know, and see what I do. And it ain't easy. It's gotten easier for me because it's like conditioning, you know. It's like anything else in life, you know. You go to the gym, you work out, you eat right, your body transforms. Weird, right? Same thing goes for, you know, business practices and personal discipline, right? If you got a big dream, well, you got to understand the things that you need to do to go make that happen. You got to figure out capital. You've got to figure out how much it costs to do things. You got to, you know, count the costs and do a good budget and plan, business model. You got to figure out sustainability. You got to figure out legal stuff. You got to figure out risk management. You got to figure out people. You got to figure out how to get a co-founder if you don't know how to code. You got to do a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's a lot. But then underpinning all of that, I think the most important thing that people got to think about is why they're doing what they're doing. Why does it matter to them? If it's just economic upside, most people that I know are either going to cut corners and end up with something they don't want, or they'll just end up as mercenaries and just chasing dollars around, which is fine, but they won't build anything really purposeful and really visionary, crazy. Like Elon Musk's a good example of this. Like you talk about contrarians, Jesus. He does not give a rat's ass what anybody thinks of him. Some people think that he's super egotistical, but like I don't think he is. I think he's wildly creative, and he has an almost supernatural ability to like see the roadmap to making things a reality, and he just goes gets in his Tesla and drives down the road, so to speak, and makes it happen. And people are sit back and just are amazed at how he does these things. But it's a very learned and disciplined thing that he does. And I'm not comparing myself to Elon, but like in terms of outcomes, I haven't gotten there yet. But you know, it's the same kind of thing, you know. But you got to check your why. Why am I doing this? Because the road to building something great is too arduous and difficult and chock full of lions and tigers and bears to do it just for vanity, sport, or economics, right? Unless you're, I mean, you can make a bunch of money, but I'm not sure that it's going to be the most fulfilling thing. Now, some people will say, well, money talks, bullshit walks. I don't care. And that's fine. But like, I know a lot of really wealthy people that in the rearview mirror are like, you know, I don't have a lot of meaning. You know, for me, it's all about that meaning. And the economics have a tendency to take care of itself. So I've done very well for myself, but is a byproduct of perseverance into the hard things that ultimately get the dream realized, which is not so easy.
Yeah, it's, you know, just reflecting on what you're saying, it's almost like there's three buckets of people from a very macro sense. One is people that never take the risk, they avoid risk. People that dream and they take risk, but they don't really have a game plan. And those people end up usually struggling, like you said, or they have to learn quickly to evolve to where I think successful contrarians are is they think independently, they embrace risk, but then they learn how to manage risk, right? And so, like, when I observe contrarians such as you, or you mentioned Elon Musk, it's like very open to criticism, very open to feedback. That's how you get better, but not open to criticism and feedback that is just based on, hey, you're doing something risky. You shouldn't do anything risky. It has to be constructive.
Exactly. There's the word. It has to be constructive and not destructive. So families are great at being destructive when it comes to feedback and advice, right? Because what they're trying to do is protect you from yourself, so to speak. Like, well, I don't know. Is that sounding a good idea? You're going to put $40,000 into this startup and you're going to go buy these prototypes and do these things. And why would you do that? Like, I mean, that's too risky. Okay. What they don't understand is the internal driver that might be motivating you is that you could revolutionize some industry or something that you're doing, and you have a passion around it for based on some life experience that you had. So the money, whatever, like, I mean, if you're successful, think about how you're going to feel at the end of that, and how much impact you made. There's, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you talk about fulfillment and actualization, how many people do we know that actually feel really fulfilled in the work that they do? I would say it's actually less now than it was even 50 years ago because we've hyper commercialized so many things. And we don't really teach purpose in school or business school or anything like that. We teach opportunism, which is what people end up doing. And so I'm of the opinion that, like, yeah, opportunism is great as long as you have purpose driving your opportunistic decisions, is going to much better align with creating those kind of things. And then but this isn't what you're contrarian, the people who are being contrarian to the contrarian, the critics, they don't think about that stuff. Like, attorneys, CPAs are great at telling you why you shouldn't do something. Okay, your family is great at telling you why you shouldn't do something. But you need people who are actually going to be supportive of the creative genius that we all have somewhere locked in ourselves. I personally believe that every human being has a unique trait of creative genius that is dying to be expressed into the world. The question is, what is it, and how do you find it and then develop it and then express it in a way that actually creates a lot of value for people in humanity? When you do that, the return is fulfillment, and also a lot of times economics, right? Because that value is valuable. It's worth something to people, and they'll usually pay you for it. So there's an exchange of value that happens by the creation of the thing, and then the reciprocity comes back to you based on the law of reciprocity and how commerce works, right? So feedback has to be constructive. I've learned this over the years. I mean, I'm very careful with feedback, especially to wildly creative people who you have no idea what's going on in their mind. Okay, the visions they have, the things they dream about, whatever. Like, why would you want to squash those dreams? Why would you want to squash that? Like, I'm not. That's not my lived experience. I don't know what they're doing in their head. And for me to think that my way is the only way, or what I think is the most important thing, or they should do what I tell them to, is just an exercise of arrogance. It's like, I have no idea what's going on in that mind of theirs. Like, why would my advice be good? I'm more focused on, like, how to help people align with their own creativities in a way that's going to be most beneficial for them and others, and um, giving them tools to do that. Right? So, like, I don't know, choose your own adventure, but, like, I'm not going to give you feedback. Well, that sounds like a bad idea. Now, if your business model, if say you send me a pitch deck and I look at it and I'm just like, what's your business model? And they don't even have an answer for it. well, that'll just take care of itself. No, they don't actually usually just take care of themselves. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what happens if you start monetizing a public good that you want to build? What happens to the game design? Is it sustainable? Is it benevolent? Like, what does it look like? I think ChatGPT is a good example of this. OpenAI started as a nonprofit, and it was supposed to be open AI. But then this little silly thing like raising capital comes along, and they had to create this whole weird structure of like some operating LLC that's controlled by the nonprofit, and then that's the thing that's running the company, and but the board's over here. I mean, you want to talk about a governance logjam and why Sam ended up getting fired and then brought back because the largest investor, Microsoft, is like, hell no, like we want. So you can see the clash of the titans thing. So these kinds of things happen. Not that OpenAI is going to go away. I mean, they're maybe a good example, but maybe a bad example. But there's a lot of others that have created just bad business design that just don't live to see another day, because they didn't really think through these things. So, yeah, you got to think through logistics. You got to think about legal things. You got to think about design. In addition to dreaming big dreams, there's just so much to do when it comes to execution that, like, you got to be smart. So, if I'm giving advice, you got to anticipate well is what I would tell people. You got to think through what you're deciding and what you're going to put in place and how those decisions are going to impact things downstream and whether or not that's going to create the outcome that you're dreaming about. Because if you make a decision, like for example, somebody sent me a pitch deck one time about a DAO, and I asked about they were raising capital for it, and I asked them about the legal structure, and they're like, well, we're using a C Corp. And I'm like, what? You're using a C Corp for a DAO? Who? Wait. So the C Corp owns the DAO? Like, how's that work? Because like, then what you're saying is whoever's on the cap table, the team, the founders, and the investors own the DAO. But isn't that antithetical to like what a DAO's supposed to be? So again, they didn't think through it. So their answer was, so again, in feedback, being, it's great that they want to be contrarian and they want to build this crazy thing, but like using a C Corp is not going to help them get there. And their attorneys were the ones who recommended this because investors typically want to be into a C Corp, which of course they do. But this is the new frontier. You can't use what got us here isn't going to get us where we want to go. So you got to figure out a new path, right? Which is what OpenAI did. It just, kind of fell apart. But anyways, so yeah, be constructive, I think, is the best. And also have a little humility. Like, your lived experience is not going to look the same for somebody else. It's just going to be different. So temper your how intense you are about your opinions, because that's only being informed by your lived experience, not theirs. And like, it may not transpose, and it may end up that you give them some bad advice if you get to, move my way is really good, and they might go do it, and it's wrong for them, right? So
What have your what
anyhow,
have your dark moments looked like when you were doubting yourself, and what did you need from others during those
well,
times?
I have to say, I don't doubt myself much. And it's not an arrogance thing. It's a choice. It's a decision I've made a long time. And it doesn't mean that I don't have like moments of like, call it despair or exhaustion, where I'm just like, ugh, fuck. I don't want to do this anymore. Where it's like, imagine, mile 20 of a marathon, right? Where it's like you come all this way, but you're freaking blown, dude. You're so tired. It's like it would be really easy just to stop running right now. I feel like that a lot, but I have, um, so my dark moments aren't very dark, I guess you could say. probably one of my best strengths, and this is a skill that I developed over time, but I think I was born with some of this a little bit. I was talking about, like, I just kind of don't care. I find that dark moments are mostly fueled by fear, the what ifs, right? And it's like, oh my God, the world's imploding. Like, I had a situation back in, years and years and years ago, where I had an investor and who became kind of an activist investor in a different startup. And man, he was making my life miserable. And I mean, he was doing all sorts of things. And I made the mistake of, this is before safes existed. Before safes became a thing, you did convertible notes, is what you did. And he was the only person I've ever seen actually try to foreclose on a convertible note. And the mistake I made was, I should have done just a price round and made him equity, but I'm not sure he would have done the deal, which probably would have saved me a lot of headache too. But at the time I needed the capital, so I did the deal, and I ended up with this huge headache of a problem. And, like, in reality, it was really bad. It was really bad. And, team morale, and just the board was all flustered, and he was being such a pain. And if you want to talk about a dark time. But in my mind, what's weird is, like, I mapped out the way to get through it, and I architected this path to make him happy, make him go away, do a bunch of things, we had to tactically execute on. And we just created a punch list and went and did it, right? And it took 6 months, but we did it. Ended up selling that particular business to the employees, and they're still running it. And he ended up getting some money, and we kind of did a bunch of things that kind of abstracted him away from any power and control, got rid of the convertible note leverage and all that stuff, and we lived to fight another day, right? So I guess I see problems as opportunities and dark times as opportunities to. The obstacle is the path. So when you're presented with lions and tigers and bears, oh my, which you certainly will be, letting the fear set in, where you start feeling sorry for yourself or get really emotional or whatever. I mean, we're all humans. This is all possible. But I think that choosing to recognize it as a battle cry, to really think about how to solve this puzzle. Because I see these things as puzzles, right? It's like, okay, I mean, even innovation's a puzzle. You got all the little pieces you got to put together to kind of, create. Like, I was even describing this, with Elon earlier. It's like, he's a dreamer. He's got crazy bigger dreams than me, and, like, he's doing all this stuff, and it's like he's solving puzzles.
What helps
That's
you?
what he's
What
doing.
helps you solve the puzzles?
Meditation.
So it's in.
You know,
There's not.
you gotta. So the answers lie within. Remember what I talked about, the creative genius that we all have, right? We're equipped with the answers, believe it or not. In my lived experience, most of the answers that I get come from quiet meditation time. I've had a meditation practice for now 13, 14
So
years.
it's kind of tapping into your inner voice, listening to
It's
that.
quieting your mind. This helps with dealing with anxiety and other things, but learning how to really discipline your mind so you don't let fear take over. It's like the little devil on your shoulder, He's, yeah, you're gonna run out of money. You're not good enough. You're not smart. They're gonna find out you're a fraud. They're gonna. We all have that shit. Okay, I just go. Psh, psh, I don't have time for you. So I'm gonna listen to this guy who's. I need to quiet my mind so that I can listen to this guy over here who's like, what you should do is this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, that's actually a really interesting idea. So contemplation, which is a form of meditation, is part of my practice, where my best ideas and my best solutions, the buffacorn came from this, right? I mean, that's great branding, man. People love this stuff, right? Name me another conference or event in crypto globally that has the characters and branding that we have.
Well, and for the audience, let's talk about that. So let's talk about who the Bufficorn is, and let's talk about ETHDenver, right?
Yeah,
Because that's kind of like the crown jewel here,
sure.
right?
Yep.
So, ETHDenver, one of the biggest crypto conferences in the world. It's interesting. I took some friends there last year, and it's funny. People never know what to make of it, right? But
Nah, it's wild.
what I think is incredible about ETHDenver is that you really get to, I think we forget being in crypto that crypto is an ecosystem, and it's some of the smartest
Oh
people
yeah.
working within their respective domains trying to solve big problems, right? And a lot of people look at the space. This is the one of the things I've talked about, and they say, okay, is this a degen casino? Is this a escape pod from fiat? What is this? And I've always said, to me, it's venture 2.0 in the sense of it's a tokenized version of doing venture capital. There's really smart people solving real problems, but you don't really get hit with that in crypto very often in the face like you do when you walk into ETHDenver, right? So let's talk
Mhm.
about that. How did this manifest? What's the Bufficorn? And what do you have planned for this year? And what are you most proud of accomplishing?
Well, that's a lot to cover, but we'll start with the Bufficorn. So the Bufficorn is a meme that we created that, in the early days of Ethereum, Vitalik used to wear this T-shirt that had a unicorn on it. Somebody made him a T-shirt that was holding a sign that said Ethereum. So this was sort of a thumb nose at the VC culture, which a billion-dollar company is a unicorn, right?
Yep.
And he did it without raising any VC money, right? So he's essentially, it's sort of a meme they were using, but we're like, okay, well, but we're in Colorado, and what if we, but unicorns, I don't know, it's a little cliche and a little overused, like, and think about it, does a unicorn really embody the Web3 spirit? Not really. I mean, they're. When was the last time you saw a unicorn hanging out with another unicorn? They don't collaborate. They're kind of assholes,
Yeah, when's the last time you saw a unicorn?
Right. But I mean, I'm sort of joking, but even in cartoons and stuff, unless you're talking My Little Pony, unicorns don't hang out with each other. That's sort of the meme of a unicorn is like you don't see one.
Sure.
So we're like, well, but what if we merged the buffalo, the American buffalo, which is the Colorado state animal, with the unicorn? So you got the community collaborative herd animal like you have in a buffalo, but then you have the magical, fantastical side of the unicorn, which again, back to my belief that people are endowed with this creative genius that's just begging to be expressed. So we came up with the Bufficorn, and it started as like people didn't know what to make of it, and they're like, what's that animal like thing? And then we got a mascot costume, and then we did a bunch of other stuff. Then we did an NFT sale to the community that has a bunch of utility to it, and then we did a children's book where we had a Bufficorn, and it's called B is for Bufficorn, and we had two sitting governors read the book to a bunch of kids on main stage one year. I mean, it's wild, right? Like, and now when we made plushies and we had onesies and we had all this stuff, pajama pants that made it to billions. So our pajama pants were literally on the latest season, I think episode 3. They're literally in the show on HBO
Wow.
or Showtime or whatever it's on,
Incredible.
So like people love this stuff and it's become kind of an icon.
Yeah.
So how did ETHDenver become what it is? Well, I think the spirit of the unicorn or the Bufficorn is kind of an embodiment of what we want the culture and vibe to be. So you go to most crypto conferences, and quite frankly, they feel like traditional things. You got a lot of the suits and the corporate entities and the bankers and the attorneys and all this. And you think about who goes to conferences. Well, that's who's got the money to pay $1,500 a ticket. Well, the first thing that we did was say, well, look, if we're going to be Web3, you've got to eliminate economic barriers to learning these things, right? Like, so you can't just expect the attorneys who, I mean, what incentives do attorneys and accountants and people making a bunch of money, aside from being opportunistic in a new emerging field, what incentive do they have to change anything they're doing? So you're going to get the same traveling circus coming to these things, and it's like, is that really the vibe you want? So no. So we said, well, we see ourselves more as a festival, an innovation festival that's run and owned by the community. And the three-legged stool is education, community, and building, or as we say, biddling. We created that meme as well. So now there's like 900 million mentions of biddle on X, formerly Twitter. We started that, right? That's our rally cry was biddle instead of hodl from Bitcoin. Anyway, because we don't charge, because we focus on education and not shilling, it's not just a commercial venue where people are trying to buy and sell and do deals, although that does happen. We're incentivizing people to express creativity by building projects. We're the only large event in the world whose main event is the hackathon. Everything else is conference first, which is talkie. We prefer biddle first, which is walkie.
And I think
meaning
you
doing.
feel that at ETHDenver, right? So, like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
you go to other crypto conferences, and it's like the business development and salespeople, and they're there to meet.
All the usual
Yeah, it's all the
suspects.
usual suspects, and that's fine. And there's a place for that. But I think what's different about ETHDenver is it's really about the technology and the technologists, right? So it's the developers, it's the project or project managers of the whatever is being built. It's the protocol leads because, like you mentioned,
The founders,
right, the
the
founders are
innovators,
just
the
whole time to
visionaries,
hack
the
and build.
creatives, the designers, the artists. We're tapping into we're a community of communities, and we aggregate these creative communities together into a big tent with a blank canvas, and we just let creative collisions just randomly happen. So it's not there for, if you think about a conference in an expo hall and why we're there, well, we're doing business development, we're trying to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that's boring. And y'all paid $1,500 to come and smell each other's farts. Okay.
And let's talk
Boring.
about, John. Let's
Okay.
talk about the result of that because I think it's really cool to talk about. Right, there's been so many protocols and projects that have started at ETHDenver, right?
Hundreds, I mean, probably thousands at this point. The stories that we get every day, every week, the messages I get every day, every week from people who have been touched and impacted positively by ETHDenver. Either they found their first crypto gig, or they founded a project, found a co-founder, they raised capital, they were ultra successful, like 1inch or POAP or Pool Together or some of these other big projects that have come out of ETHDenver. Like, they were inspired by the things that happened. They were launched into the ethersphere by this creative collective, emergent order biddleathon / festival that they got to attend for free. They just had to figure out how to get their ass to Denver. But like, removing those economic barriers and really just letting people have, a big Web3 principle is sovereignty, right? And the idea of being able to give people the choice, which is the cornerstone of freedom and sovereignty, to participate in a way that's meaningful for them. So we don't prescribe anything, we're just encouraging creativity, which brings people to the table in a much different way than it's sort of a homogenous, sort of buttoned up suit thing, or even business casual or whatever. We got people. I'm literally running around on the stage in a Buffacorn onesie introducing the governor of Colorado this year. Okay. I'm wearing a onesie. Okay. Doing that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
You would never think about doing that in most contexts.
now,
But we do it.
yeah,
And not only do we get away with it, but people love it.
yeah. Well, I was just thinking, I'm having these kind of epiphanies. I've been right like since the beginning. I've gone almost every year, and as you're talking, what I've realized is ETHDenver is this conference where a lot of the barriers, the normal barriers to creativity, get removed. Right. So, what do I wear?
Exactly. Well, this is by design, though. This is why nobody's been able
Right. No, I want to
to
highlight it.
replicate
It's
what
like
we're doing.
nobody worries about what do I want to wear, what do I have to pay. Like you guys give out free lunches, right? There's tons of swag or T-shirts or things to get there.
You could literally come with the clothes on your back as long as what you're wearing is like approved by the transportation authority.
Yeah, and you go.
And you could leave, bring an empty backpack, and you will leave with more clothes that you could have for 2 weeks. You'll eat the whole time, paid
Yeah.
by either us or some other side event sponsor who's trying to feed you and drink you into having you join their communities. And then the creative collision opportunities are not only abundant, but they're encouraged, right? Because we focus on these three things: education, community, and building. And it's not and we don't have a prescribed expectation except that we want to see a lot of projects built, because the project, the volume, the inertia, the fidelity of the projects, the more we build, the more probability we have of seeing one of these become a big thing.
Right, and what you
And so
feel.
the more we can accelerate the innovation curve, the faster we're going to see Web3 adoption.
Yeah, what you feel at ETHDenver, I think, now that we're talking about it, is you get this sense of excitement that only comes from people forming new ideas and testing them out in real time, right? So you go up to like
Mm-hmm.
a floor where, you guys always have beanbag chairs, right? That's one of the hallmarks. And there's
Mm-hmm.
always this floor where there's beanbag chairs and it's kind of a chill lounge and there's a DJ playing. But what you see is tons of people talking for the first time about a totally new concept that they're feeling out if they want to work on together.
Creative collisions. That's exactly what I mean. These are the creative collisions I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Because what's happening is you have curious people who are interested in expressing creativity, who are all there for kind of a shared purpose. They're there to build innovation. They're not there to develop business, right? They're Some people might be, but by and large, most people are there because our community encourages the creativity and they want to be a part of that. And so they come, they meet people, they're talking about stuff. Let's say they're in the DJ chill room, they're listening to some sweet, beats, live DJ, kombucha on tap, the whole thing. And it's an environment that encourages innovation. It's an environment that encourages them to express themselves in whatever way that matters for them. There's no prescription for this. Okay. Now, in order to get recognized and investment and attract team members and get customers and whatever, or build community, you've got to have an interesting idea that the value permeates more than just you.
Right.
Right. So you've got to be able to align your ideas with, things that people care about, or else they're just not going to pay attention. If it's just a vanity project of yours, that's okay. There's an art section too. You can do that. And sometimes people like looking at those things, and that's fine. But like, it's a big tent and a blank canvas. Come and do your thing. You do you. And my passion is creating the space for that to happen and protecting that space. Because, if I had a nickel for the amount of times people have recommended that we charge for tickets, and well, even if it's like $100, people will still pay it. You'd have all this extra money. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand game design then, because the minute I charge for tickets, the social dynamic between me and them changes. They're now a customer, where when they get to come in for free, they're just part of the community.
Mm.
And there's no commercial expectations. I'm just providing a space and a place. If they pay money, now they're expecting $100 of value. And how do you define that? What are you getting? And, all this, like, I don't know, like, we just want to keep the barriers to entry as low as possible. Plus, I don't want to create an economic gate that, for some student who doesn't have $100 can't come. That student might be the next Vitalik Buterin.
Yeah,
We don't
it's
know.
interesting. A lot of the conferences cost a lot of money, and I would say that the
A
one
lot.
the one that's probably worth the most money in terms of experience and value is
It's free.
is free,
I
right?
know.
It's kind of crazy, and hearing you talk, it's almost like that's not by accident, right? The
No,
environment
it's
you're able to
intentional.
create is created because it's free and because you've been so intentful about that. Where do you think the
And
conference is
and
going?
the social dynamic is important. And the minute you change that by making people coming to your conference or festival a customer, it's different. It's a different vibe. It's a different constituency. It's a different person who's going to come. We get a lot of students. How many college students you know of that, I mean, some of these people are piling into a car. They're driving across Nebraska from University of Nebraska. They show up, they stay at a hostel or maybe even the hostel that we build, and they're eating our food, drinking our kombucha and our yerba mate, and they don't spend any money. And then they hack, they make a few $1,000s coming. I mean, tell me what the psychological experience is for those people. It's beautiful, right? And I can't even really, and for $100, like, how many of those kids might just go, dude, I don't have $100?
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at free, right? So it's I don't think it's this is talked about enough. Is obviously it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you're trying to accomplish a profitable business, free is a little bit harder. But if you're trying to accomplish what you've mentioned, free may be the most ideal way to go. It may bring the most
Well, what
overall
we care about is, because we're community owned, I mean, we're a Colorado cooperative, right? So everybody who comes becomes a member of the co op, and it doesn't cost you anything to do it. You have to stake a sport token, which is essentially the commercial activity that you have to do from a compliance standpoint. But even that will give you. Um, so we, if you think about a cooperative's cap table, there isn't one. The owners are the members. So there's no incentive for us to just be extractive, because when you distribute a profit, it goes back to the people that you took it from. So, like, why would you charge a bunch of money to just give it back to them later? You're just creating games that are unnecessary, right? So the sponsors, on the other hand, have a lot of value that they are trying to, you could say, extract from people, or they're trying to build communities, and they're trying to get developers to work on their tools, and they're trying to incentivize people to do things. They're trying to get notoriety and brand presence, and they're the ones with the pockets. And look at how much money you're an investor. Like, look how much money people put around in these projects. I mean, it's a lot. Okay, and so you know but we've also calibrated our sponsor pricing at lower prices than what other conferences cost. So Consensus, for example, charges, the minimum package is like $50K, and people pay it all day. That's like one of our higher packages, right? Like, our lowest is $15K. Okay, if you want a booth upgrade for 5,000, you're talking $20K, and you've got a really solid presence at the event. Okay, you can go up from there. There's a lot of other things you can do, but, like, even our top packages are fractions of what you would see at these other shows. So again, the value return ratio, the ROI, comparatively is better at ETHDenver at a lower cost, and it's free for the attendees. We have a lot more of them, so we have more attendees, and we charge sponsors less to get access to more people. So, like, good luck competing with that. So, like, we care about education, and we also don't want just the same people showing up every time. So let me ask you a question. If I'm brand new to crypto and I don't know anything about it, am I going to pay $1,500 to come? Or let's say I'm a little skeptical and I'm not sure. Am I going to pay $1,500 to come and listen to all that?
right.
No. If it's free, will I? I'm much more inclined. Really? What do you mean it's free? Well, it's a community-owned thing. This is part of Web3. This is part of the thing that they're doing. It's like, you come, you become a member, and you don't have to do anything. Show up and contribute if you want, or eat some tacos, whatever. And they're like, what? It doesn't make any sense. And then they come and they see what you're talking about. This, you know, what is this? But they love it, and they're like, I'm in, right? So the experience is just much better at onboarding people, at creating sustainability. And then we've had the good fortune of being, I guess you could say, so popular that we now don't have any issue with sponsorships.
And so does all the capital come from sponsorships?
all of it.
So I mean, where do you see the conference going in 5 years? And as it continues to grow, if we're charging
Depends where the
sponsors,
community wants to take it. Like if last year, this past season, we had a waiting list about 100 long of people who wanted to sponsor that we had no room.
interesting.
Okay, so if now there's a balance that you have to strike here. Like, as you scale, you could risk things like culture and ethos. Like, you have to be careful about operational execution and scaling and other things. Like, it's not so easy to do. We've been struggling with that a little bit just the last couple of seasons because we grew from 2020 where we had 2,500 people in person to 2022 where we had 15,000 people, and then this year we had 25,000 people. It's like, well, where does it stop? If it's free, you know, but we don't want to gate it. So it's like, okay, well, it's going to grow. So where does it go? I don't know. It might be that the way to let the pressure out of the balloon is we have some regional events globally that people who might normally travel here can still get access to the Sporkhouse, Spork Fest kind of vibe, and we could do some regional hackathons and then take the winners and bring them to ETHDenver, and sort of there's ways to kind of think about it. Um, as long as there's value for sponsors to build community, to hire devs, to promote their brands, talk about their new tools, I don't see any problem with us being able to fund 50,000 or 100,000 people. What does it look like at that scale? I don't know. Look at Burning Man. Burning Man's 75,000 people, and it's gotten a little out of control for some people's opinions. It's definitely not as intimate as it used to be. But I don't know. I mean, we try to focus on the event in front of us. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't grow that much this year for a few different reasons. One is we're formalizing membership in the DAO now. So as opposed to just saying I'm a member, the legal people wanted us to use the co-op as a formal tool. You do have to stake your one spork or more to become a formal member. But noobs don't know what any of that stuff is, right? So have we sort of made a barrier, even though we're trying to demonstrate this tech and we're trying to dog food, and are we sort of creating a barrier? Well, we had 40,000 applications last year for 25,000 spots. I suppose we'll probably have more. We might have more interest, but some of the people who might be brand new might not be inclined to go through the steps to try to learn how to do those things. So I don't know. But I think eventually it's going to continue to grow. I mean, we've been so successful with it, and this, I'm informing my statement there on its success based on what people tell us, right? So not just my own anecdotal opinion, but like people love it, they love it, and we're happy to continue to produce it and welcome more and more people into the ecosystem as we can and still sustain our values, right? So there's a balance. Even this season, we brought in some operational staff that doesn't come from crypto, and there's not a lot of big production teams and event management teams that know crypto that well, and we needed to hire them full time. So the people who are in the event space here, they do this as a living for a bunch of different events, and it's like, well, you can't just hire them dedicated, but we needed people to do that. Well, in doing that, it took some time to really calibrate them. I mean, some of them owned Bitcoin and they had some cursory understanding of what Web3 is doing, but like they didn't really understand it. And they bring a lot of, you know, uh, sort of, you could say, corporate mentality with them and how they operate things. It took a little while to break those habits, right? Because so those are the kind of risks you have to take, but you have to take your time and you have to be patient and you have to like not shoot the moon all at once because it takes time to develop these things. This year, I've told the team that it's the year of optimizing our scale and our growth and really reinforcing our ethos and cultural vibes in that optimization to make sure that we don't lose our way, right? Because I don't want to be The one thing that really breaks my heart is when people say, well, I like the old ETHDenver because it was more vibey and more intimate. And it's like, well, but then how do we educate more people? If we just make it like a club where there's only a certain amount of people that can come, yeah, sure, we can just sit around and smell each other's farts like other conferences. But like, it's about bringing new people in, and it's about expressing new creativity and giving people a place and a space to do that. So the only way you can do that is to grow the community. So you have to continue to go on that trajectory, or else you're not living your values, which would not be acceptable, in my opinion. So we're just going to do it, but we want to make sure that when you come, even if there's 100,000 people, it feels like it's intimate, and it feels like that vibey, cool culture. That even in the micro place that you're in with it, it doesn't ever feel like it's going to swallow you.
Yeah. Well, listen.
That's hard, super hard.
Well, we're out of time, but I'm excited, man. I think ETHDenver is a must-attend event if you're interested in crypto or want to attend crypto, and it's been incredible to see how far it's grown, and just tap into your thought process of growing with it and making it grow.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I'm I'm excited too. I'm always most excited to like where what are the most interesting creative collisions that are going to happen, you know, because you don't know when they're going to happen and with whom.
Right.
You know, you have no idea until it's over and you're like, holy shit, look at that. You know, like I really look forward to that. The other thing that I look forward to is there's definitely some personal joy for me in seeing people enjoy themselves. And it's an energy thing. It's not like, oh, we're having fun. Okay, that's different. I'm talking about like there's a joy, there's a happiness that people exude when they're in this environment. It's like, you know, a family reunion kind of vibe where you haven't seen these people yet and they're around like-minded people and people are talking ideas and they're inclusive and they're nice and they're loving and I'm expressing and creating and doing and building and it's just wild experience. How do you manufacture that?
Yeah.
I don't think you can. So I'm looking forward to it too. I always do. It's a lot of work, but we'll see you in February. But thank you for the time.
Yeah, man. I'll see you there, and I'm excited to chat more about it.